Another day, another real world test. Today we're doing it on the Motorola RAZR Ultra 2025, the latest high-end flippy phone from Motorola. But I've had this phone for a while now, and at this point, the price has come down significantly, making this a very different review. More on that later. And, as per the usual, we will explore while we test out this phone. But first things first.
Coffee. Check. And welcome to Coffee Check. Now, I opened this coffee shop about 11 months ago now, and now the roastery is finally up and running, and after a lot of testing, I finally have my first self-roasted coffee. This is matte black. I personally roasted here in the back of the cafe, I bag it myself, and I even shipped them out. It took a lot of experimenting and testing to get it to something that I'm happy with, as you would imagine, because I'm pedantic, but eventually it got it to a point where I love it and the baristas do too, and we've actually had a lot of good feedback from customers even, as we've been serving it low-key in the coffee shop as our house drip for a bit. But more about the coffee quickly. It's the Castillo variety that comes from the Manos Juntos micromill in the Cauca region of Colombia, so it's a single origin traceable to the farmers, which was important to me. It also makes everything a lot harder to have your drip as a single origin instead of a blend, but I always seem to make my life more difficult, so why stop now? Anyway, it's a medium roast, as according to a spectrometer, by the way, because objective data, and it has some brighter acidity, tart fruit notes, and a super clean finish. Now, it's meant for a filter brewing method, so think drip, AeroPress, pour over, etc. But people who've bought it actually have been telling me that they're getting good espresso from it, so feel free to give that a try as well. I personally like it as a pour over, but again, it's gonna be great for whatever filter style you would want to do. Anyway, it's out in the world now, after about a year or so of me having this coffee shop, which is insane. But honestly, I'm just really enjoying making something with my hands and like putting it out into the world like a physical thing. It's kind of cool. So feel free to come by the shop if you're in the neighborhood and try our drip coffee, and check out the link below to buy some or even other roasters coffee and gear that are our favorites here in the cafe as well. As always, appreciate the support. Okay, enough of me advertising my own product in this video. Okay, so we need to get this out of the way. The international naming versus US for the RAZR is obnoxiously confusing. So the RAZR Ultra, the one that came out now in 2025 that we have here in the States, is the RAZR Ultra 60. Outside of the US. The RAZR Plus from last year here in the US is the RAZR 50 Ultra internationally, and as such is the predecessor to the RAZR Ultra that I have here, despite this one being an Ultra and last year's being a Plus. So that's what I'm going to be comparing this one to, and what I mean when I reference last year's model. To make things more confusing though, if I've not already lost you, this year Motorola also announced a RAZR Plus in the US only, alongside the RAZR base model and this RAZR Ultra. So this year's Plus, for all intents and purposes, is the same as last year's Plus, aka the 50 Ultra. It's just with some added dust protection and a titanium rather than stainless steel hinge, but it's at a lower price point to make way for the Ultra being a higher tier now. With all of that said, the design on the RAZR Ultra hasn't really changed much from last year's RAZR Plus when it comes to shape and form factor, but that's not a bad thing. This isn't the first RAZR to have that edge-to-edge cover screen that the cameras are punching through, for example, and it has generally the same shape and dimensions, give or take a millimeter here and there, being 10 grams heavier and a 7-inch instead of a 6.9-inch screen compared to the Plus from last year. What is new though are the color options and some of the build materials. For example, if you buy the Pantone Scarab version of the phone, you'll get an Alcantara backing, which would probably look strange on a slab phone, but it works really well here. If you buy the Mountain Trail color, you'll get a wooden back, which is very on brand for Motorola, especially for those who followed the brand a decade ago when they had a wood back on the original Moto X in 2013. Now the hinge on the phone feels okay, and honestly, if I hadn't used other flip phones, I'd say it was good, but because I have and the others are just more solid feeling. Either way though, it works well enough to position it on a table at whatever angle you would probably need. It also has an IP48 rating now, compared to last year that only had a water rating with its IPX8, and the 4 basically means it's protected against things larger than 1 millimeter from getting inside, so it's not really a big deal, but good to have, I guess. Now the main screen is pretty tall, at 7 inches, which is actually taller than most slab phones, and the resolution is slightly higher than last year's model to get a better pixel density, and the screen is a fair bit brighter as well. Now I will say that because of the aspect ratio, the phone does feel a bit tall, but not that much more than any other flip phone, so whatever. And the display itself is actually pretty good. Its 165 Hz refresh rate means that it feels extremely smooth for scrolling and gaming, at least on games that support that high, but even if they support 120 FPS, it'll hit that too, of course, and it can vary its refresh rate to save on on battery when you don't need it to be that high, like when a static image is on the display. Now that higher resolution helps with text and images looking a bit crisper and more detailed, along with the higher brightness that makes it easy to see outdoors. Now the cover screen doesn't get quite as bright as the main one, but I still found it to be bright enough for any situation I found myself in while using it outside either way.
Boat number 2.
Yes! Made it to the Bronx. Welcome to City Island here in New York City. And no, it's not a city within a city, it's just an island in the city. And City Island is technically a part of the Bronx borough, which it is just off the coast from. But it's known for its nautical history. And that history is on display here inside this restaurant called the Black Whale. The building that it's in actually has kind of a mysterious history behind it, with some people saying that it was actually once a women's penitentiary on Hart Island that's just across the harbor, then brought over by barge 100 years ago. But that's a different video. Regardless, over the years, this building has served as an antique shop, a coffee house, and even a communist party hangout. Now, this whole island used to be dominated by the boat building industry. Sailmakers here have crafted sails that won World Cups, and fiberglass production, which they make boats out of, was just omnipresent. But as that industry began to fade here, as it does, a ton of these things here shut down, including whatever was in this building at the time. But in 1961, Richard DePiero, a self-proclaimed bohemian, opened it up as a dessert shop, and even held poetry readings and plays throughout the 60s. It would later become the full-fledged restaurant and bar that it is today. And with it, a flock of other bohemians followed in the 60s and 70s and actually revived the empty storefronts into various artistic and artisanal businesses. Now these days, the increased cost of living and the general vibe change from that has pushed out the bohemian culture, but the Black Whale and nearby Focal Point Gallery are the only two businesses from that time that still stand. And the Black Whale has become somewhat of a refuge for locals on what is now a bit of a destination in the summertime. But with all of this nautical decor, it's probably a good place to test out the RAZR Ultra's cameras. The RAZR Ultra has a dual camera system, a 50 megapixel main camera, and thankfully a 50 megapixel ultra wide instead of the 2 times on the old and new RAZR Plus. And Motorola went with a sensor crop to get the 2 times optical zoom, similar to every other manufacturer which also does that, and it works well enough in good lighting to not miss a 2 times telephoto camera. Generally speaking, the camera is better than it has been for sure. Colors are reasonably vibrant, details are relatively crisp, and again, having that ultra wide is just better than the not worth an extra camera on the phone 2 times. And its colors and sharpness are also not bad as well. Now, because of the lack of a telephoto camera though, images are noticeably degraded compared to phones with dedicated telephoto lenses as soon as you get to 3x even, and worse the more you go. But again, in the majority of situations, photos look pretty good. Although I did find that it wasn't quite able to handle low light as well as some other models, but you could be the judge of that throughout this video. The software experience is what you would expect from Motorola. It comes with Android 15 and Motorola's skin on top, which actually feels close enough to whatever stock Android might be considered these days that it's easy to use and it's smooth. The AI features are front and center with Moto AI, as you would have guessed, given all of the AI on all of the phones now. And you can quickly access it with a physical AI button on the left edge of the phone. When you press it, a Moto AI menu will pop up, allowing you to ask Moto AI to remember specific content, record and transcribe audio, or ask Moto AI a question. Now at times, Moto AI will suggest you search something with Perplexity, which comes pre-installed with the phone. And apparently, Microsoft Copilot is there for other things. And they also mention Meta as well to get you caught up on WhatsApp or something. And so is Google Gemini, which is still launched, like every other Gemini-enabled phone, by holding the power button on the other side. Needless to say, it's confusing. Now, I originally thought when I saw them announce this that I could choose whatever Gen AI model that I wanted to use for whatever test, kind of like how Adobe does this with Firefly. But it seems Moto AI somehow decides that for you sometimes? I don't know. Also, Moto AI and Gemini don't really interact in any way, and it's a little confusing to have them exist side by side on a phone without communicating with each other at least. That's not to mention the fact that I generally find Gemini to be better all around. Now, the software still works a little differently on the cover screen than on the main screen. You can scroll scroll between screens for things like weather, your calendar, and so on, sort of like a smartwatch display. But you can also access any of your apps, and you can choose a variety of apps to show on the cover screen. And I will say that I didn't expect it to, but I found myself using the cover display a lot more, especially for quick things like voice to text in any of the messaging apps, tapping my email notifications for ones that look important, and being brought directly into the email where I can actually read it and see images, etc. To also using it for Lyft and Uber. It's actually kind of useful. Now you can of course do this on the new Flip 7 as well, but you need to jump through a few hoops to get it to work in the first place. More on that in my upcoming Flip 7 video because I am still waiting for mine to arrive. The one that I've been using in this video for the photos is Fisher's here. Now, one bit of the disappointment on the software front, Motorola only promises 3 years of software updates. Now that's pretty poor compared to Samsung and Google, who are offering up to 7 years. Hopefully, Motorola can catch up even a bit on future phones.
Are you out of breath from throwing the ball at the wall?
Why don't you shut up?
We're here now at the Man Overboard Bar, which is another beloved, if not controversial spot here on City Island. Now, as you can tell, it's also nautical themed. I think you can sense a pattern here on this island, but it's a little roomier. Plenty of space for things like live bands and other events. It's also a great place to catch a game, so long as you're rooting for the New York team. Inside, there's a pool table, dartboard, and a great drink selection. Could you argue that its decor is a little bit tacky? Sure, but the sheer commitment to how far they take it actually kind of pushes it somehow into charming. And Mike A., the artist that painted much of the interior, is kind of a local legend, having worked on a number of businesses and massive murals around New York City and beyond. You might recognize the style even. His latest work was a tribute to a Bronx Tale in a giant mural. Now, the battery on the RAZR Ultra is good actually, especially for a flip phone. But of course, today was not a normal day as I use the camera way more than you ever would. But here is my usage from another day that was more normal so you have some idea of the battery life. Charging is decent too. If you charge through a wire and a compatible charger, you'll get past 70% in only about 30 minutes, which isn't bad at all. There's also 30-watt wireless charging, but only if you use Motorola's stand, because it doesn't support Qi 2, which is kind of a bummer. Now, Qi 2 is basically the new wireless charging standard that works with MagSafe accessories and ensures faster, more reliable wireless charging across different devices. So, unless you have that Motorola charging stand, you'll be limited to just a slower wireless charging speed and, of course, no magnets. Now, the phone has the Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset inside, which is the same chip that you'll find in other high-end phones like the Galaxy S25 series, and it performs similarly. It handles everything I threw at it fine, whether that's heavy multitasking or gaming. Now, as a total package, the RAZR Ultra is probably one of the best flip phones that you can get right now, if you consider how useful its cover screen is and battery life. The cameras aren't the best that you'll find at this price point, and I personally prefer the look and feel of the Flip 7. Even using the hinge on it feels more solid, and I'm also just a fan of the straight edges. And there is a $200 price difference between the lowest storage RAZR Ultra at 512 gigs compared to the lowest storage on the Flip 7, 256 gigs. But that is actually no longer the case. Motorola has dropped the price to $1099, the same as the Flip 7, but also right now at the time of making this video at least, you can actually get the normally $1,500 1TB model for that same $1099. And that starts to make this a very different comparison.
And there you go. Let me let you guys think of the phone. Also it versus the Flip 7, especially now that the price has gone down so much. And also what you thought of this video. Always appreciate hearing from you guys. Let me know in the comments below. Also, ding the bell to be notified when I do new videos and we explore new places with tech. Right now though, I think I'm gonna go back into the bar and see if I can beat Fisher at darts. Good night. Jesus. Not surprised. Can't escape noise though. You know how it goes.